organisms, and climate impact on reproductive activity of aquatic organisms, impact on feeding biology, appearance or emerging of new resources. As we all know, there is a loss of biodiversity, but similarly, there is an appearance or emerging of new resources to the fish. And impact of climate change on the adaptations and mitigation measures. That means how the fish itself is getting adapted to this environment, and how the scientists, we are getting adapted to the changed environment, and what are the mitigations measures which as a for changing climate scenario, and finally to conclude the talk. Let us see, as I told earlier, with a little introduction, let me go into the marine fisheries. So the global average air temperature, which is rose by 0.9 degrees centigrade last 140 previous 140 years, the rise is about 0.9 degrees centigrade. Whereas if this trend continues, the projected increase in temperature will be 2.2 to 4.8 degrees centigrade by the end of this century, that is by 2100. For 140 years, the increase in temperature is 0.9 degrees centigrade, whereas for the another 80 years, the increase will be around 2.2 to 4.8 degrees centigrade. When you take the intensity, it is almost 2 to 5 times greater when compared to the previous. And till recently, when you say for the last 2 to 3 decades, forget about the common man, even the scientists were not in the position to believe whether this climate change is a myth or reality. But after witnessing a lot of extreme weather events, cyclones, hurricanes, droughts, whatnot, so many incidences. After witnessing these incidences, not only the scientist, today even the common man is thinking global warming or climate change is a reality. Hence, we should projections. Earlier, we have seen end of the century, what will be the projection. And this projection was done by Berkeley Earth Intergovernmental Planet and Climate Change. According to them, the average increase in the temperature will be great at the end of, but it varies from country to country. When you see these projections, no country on the earth is spared. So the temperature increase will be seen in almost all the in Canada. Whereas when you take the countries like India, it is only 2.160 degree centigrade. So, and in Australia and Chile, Peru, it is around 2 to 2.5 degrees centigrade. And what will happen if this temperature and it will be more frequent and intense. This we have already witnessed. I told for the last 2 decades, we have witnessed a lot of extreme weather events. But according to these projections, what they say is it will be more frequent and it will be more intense. And nearly almost all the ecosystem And when you see the projections, the sea surface temperature is likely to increase by 2 to 3.5 degrees centigrade by the end of this century. That means the intensity, if you take it, is almost 10 to 15 times compared to the last 15 years. And northern Indian Ocean, which includes Kerala and Karnataka coastal waters, has been identified as one of the 17 climate change hotspots among the world oceans. So the average temperature when you take along the coastal Karnataka for the last 1960 to 61, it was 27.6 degrees centigrade, and which was rose to 28.1 degrees centigrade during 2011 to 2020. And it's a period of about 40 to 60, 50 to 60 years. And the temperature difference, if you take, it is around 0.5 to 0.6 degrees centigrade. And according to the projections, by the end of 2050, it may increase to 30 degrees centigrade. And here the difference, if you take, it is almost 2 degrees centigrade. So another 30 years, the increase will be very enormous, and that will be very high compared to previous years. Hence, long-term climate change, which will affect the ocean environment and its capacity to sustain fishery stocks, and is likely to exacerbate the stress on marine fish stocks. We have already predicted the atmospheric temperature increase, sea surface temperature increase, but it is very difficult to predict the extent to which these parameters will affect fisheries in different regions and different species. So it is not yet clear. What will happen if the temperature increases? As I already told, there will be a rise in sea level, which we have already experienced how this rise in sea level has caused a lot of havocs. There are two main causes for the rise in sea level. One is the thermal expansion. It is due to the increase of the sea surface temperature. And the other one is melting of the ice. So the one which causes major causative factor for the sea level rise is thermal expansion. Here, because of the warming of the water, there is a thermal expansion, and which is responsible for the 70% of the rise in sea level. Whereas the other thing, melting of ice, it is due to the melting of glaciers and ice sheets from the polar regions, and this contribute to about 30% of the rise in sea. Here, in the first picture, you can notice from 1850 to 2010, how the glacier sheet is getting reduced over the years. And the satellites have seen that the average Arctic sea ice is by 2.7% per decade with a faster melting rate in summer. The rate of the decline in entire Arctic ice coverage is getting accelerated year by year. And here you can notice in the Glacier National Park, earlier there were around 150 glaciers in 1850, and now it is reduced to 26, and the reduction is to the tune of 61%. See the extent the glaciers which was present during 1850, and just see the extent which is present and which is there at present. And when you take the global sea level rise, the global sea level rise from the past 20 years is 3.2 millimeter. And according to the projections, by 2100, it may rise from 75 mm to about 2 meters with an increased effect on climate. Due to this, the major coastal cities may get affected. Sometimes we may lose some of the major coastal cities, and there will be a loss of estuarine ecosystem, coastal ecosystem, wetlands, etc. Here, I will just give you one or two examples how the ecosystem is getting deteriorated due to sea level. Rise in sea level, which destroys many coastal ecosystems, as I already mentioned, mangroves and short marshes. We all know estuarine ecosystem is a diverse and dynamic environment wherein several organisms depend on these type of ecosystem for their nursery, breeding, and so many other activities. I'll give two examples here. One is the marine shrimp and other one is the freshwater prawn. As we all know, the juveniles of the marine shrimps, which is in the sea, which gets matured and become adult. And once it lays eggs, it metamorphosizes into a lot of larval stages like nucleus, zooia, and mysis. And for feeding or to complete its nursery stage, it will move on to the estuary, wherein it will become post larvae and again goes back to the ocean. And we all have studied similarly. There are prawns, freshwater prawn, namely the Macrobrachium rosenbergi and Macrobrachium malcolmsoni, which move from riverine waters to the estuarine water. Here, they move for breeding. The buried female moves from the river and comes to the estuary. There, the eggs will be hatched out, and the larvae again they metamorphosize into post larvae and goes back to the river to complete its life cycle. These are only two examples I am giving here how the life cycle of a prawn or shrimp is depending on the estuarine environment. Similarly, a lot of anadromous and catadromous fishes which depend on these environments for completing their life cycle. Not all these aquatic organisms will get affected due to this sea level rise. When there is sea level rise, as I told earlier, we may have to lose all these dynamic diverse environments in future. So the next parameter is dissolved oxygen. As we know, the sea surface temperature and dissolved oxygen are inversely related. Once the temperature goes up, the water loses its dissolved oxygen holding capacity. And according to one of the projections, it was found that there will be a reduction of global oxygen level by 2100 to the tune of 1 to 7%. And a lot of research institute and research studies have reported that there is an expansion of oxygen minimum zone in the Indian Ocean, which has created hypoxic condition. And in some of the cases, it has created even anoxic conditions. So this will affect the ocean productivity, nutrient cycling, carbon cycling, and marine habitat as well. We all know when there is a saturation of dissolved oxygen in the aquatic environment, the oxygen level will be around 7 to 8 mg per liter, which is required for the normal activity and behavior of the aquatic organisms. So due to this reduction in oxygenation due to sea surface, increase in sea surface temperature, nowadays, most of the waters are holding very less oxygen. And when it goes to 3 to 4, the mobile fauna which begin to migrate to higher dissolved oxygen. What are these mobile fauna? We know some of the pelagic fishes which have the ability to migrate to other areas. When they feel that this environment is not congenial, they'll move to the congenial environment by avoiding that area. But if the dissolved oxygen still goes down, the fishes will be totally absent, they will move off. Whereas some of the organisms which do not have the capacity to migrate, like shrimps, crabs, that will stay there only. And when the dissolved oxygen further reduces to 1.5, these type of organisms will be absent. And these fauna unable to escape and they initiate their survival behavior, what is called as adaptations. And at this stage, they adapt themselves to live in the situation. When it still goes down, the mortality of these sensitive fauna occurs. And when the dissolved oxygen content still reduces, there will be a formation of microbial algal mat. And finally, the sediment geochemistry will be changed and it will become a dead zone where there is no macrofauna can survive in this situation. Yeah, till now we have looked into the atmospheric temperature, sea surface temperature, and oxygen, dissolved oxygen level in the water. The other parameter is the carbon dioxide. This also is responsible for the destruction of most of the ecosystems and also the organisms which are depending on this aquatic environment. And according to the estimation, the emission in the atmosphere of this carbon dioxide has increased over the years, and it was about 275 ppm in 1750 and rise to 383 ppm in 2005. And the current global average concentration of carbon dioxide, if you take in the atmosphere now, it is around 420 ppm as of May 2022. And at present, it is 450 ppm. No, at the present trend, if it continues, it may reach 450 ppm by 2030. And this carbon dioxide concentration, if it reaches 550 ppm, it may be irreversible. It cannot be changed into other form, and which is threshold for several life processes on Earth. What will happen if the carbon dioxide concentration or content increases in the ocean? When the carbon dioxide content increases, the pH will come down. Once the pH will come down, the water become acidic. This creates acidic nature of the water. For every 1.9 microatom particulate carbon dioxide increase per year will reduce the pH by 0.002 in a year. And among the major oceans, Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean, and Atlantic Ocean, Indian Ocean is the one which is having very low. Excuse me. So, which is the pH of the Indian Ocean is very low when compared to the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. And within the Indian Ocean, if you take the Northern Indian Ocean, as I already mentioned, this Northern Indian Ocean, Karnataka and Kerala also comes under this zone, which has more pronounced difference. That means which is still having lesser pH and the water is more acidic compared to other areas. And this Indian Ocean is considered as a laboratory for the studies on ocean acidification. What will happen when the carbon dioxide content is more in water? The carbon dioxide will react with water and with the carbonates that will be converted into bicarbonate. And due to which there will be a reduction in calcium carbonate. This will result in increase in aragonite and calcite that is not congenial for many of the benthic organisms such as planktonic mollusks, crustaceans, corals, foraminiferae, theropods, coccolithophores, and which lead to the death of these organisms. And in one of the study conducted in Northern Bay of Bengal, this calcium carbonate composition of calcifying organisms is reduced by 17% from the usual 80%. We all know most of the shellfishes, they metamorphosize by the process called by shedding their shells, it will metamorphosize and growth will take place. Molting, it is called as molting. And when there is a reduction in calcium carbonate, the process of molting will get affected, and that affects on their survival as well as growth. And we know the corals are the environment ecosystems which have high biodiversity reserves. There are a lot of aquatic organisms which are depending on these corals for their survival, growth, and association with other organisms. And the acidification and rise in temperature lead to coral bleaching. And this will lead to the loss of coral ecosystem, which is considered as a reserve for many of the marine biodiversity. What is this coral bleaching? In a healthy natural corals, which is covered by an algae, and it is called as zooxanthellae. When there is increase in acidification, when there is increase in the temperature or rise in sea level, this algae will get affected, and finally the algae will die off. This is zooxanthellae is an algae which will die off. Once it dies off, the coral will become white. And this is called coral bleaching, and which is subjected to death of these corals. So let us see how this climate change impacts on the wild fish. There are 2 to 3 ways it impacts on the wild fish. One is, as I already told, if the environment is not congenial, it will be redistributed into other areas. So that means the fish population, which is shifting away from the tropical latitudes, and there will be high local extinction rates, the tropics and semi-enclosed seas. As I already told, anoxic conditions are dead zones, are the zones which is not congenial for the fish to live in. And these type of environments creates a lot of management problems in the host. That means the host has to spend a lot of energy to survive in uncongenial areas. And these type of environments are congenial for the pathogen to build up. And those who are endemic will become divided into plenty. And there is a situation called disease. The disease will occur due to the uncongenial environment and the reduction in the immune system of the host and increased pathogen will cause a disease. And because of this, more incidences of unknown diseases will be noticed in the nature. Along with this climate change and ocean acidification, there are some other factors which will be exacerbated by these stressors. What are those? We all know overfishing is one such causative agent. The potential of Indian Ocean, not Indian Ocean, of marine fisheries of India, when you consider it is around 5.31 million metric ton, we are already exploiting to the extent of 3.4 to 3.5 million metric ton at present. And whatever is there in the sea is sufficient for the recruitment of the sea. But when overfishing takes place, the recruitment will become very less. And along with the climate change, this is one parameter which affects the fisheries. And the other things are habitat loss. It is due to the illegal fishing. When there is scarcity of fish due to its redistribution to other areas, people will go for illegal fishing, and this will lead to habitat loss. And pollution by industries, domestic sewages, and plastic pollution are the other parameters which are creating havoc on the marine fisheries. I've told, is my slides are moving? Hello?
Yes, yes, Dr. Rajesh, the slides are moving fine. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I've already mentioned redistribution of fisheries resources. When you take the distribution as such, there are two types of distribution. One is the horizontal distribution and the other one is the vertical distribution. In horizontal distribution, fish move from one place to the other, whereas in case of the vertical distribution, fish moves from shallower area to deeper areas. So the warming of the sea, if you know every organisms have their own temperature reference. When the temperature increases or decreases, they avoid that place and it goes to the area where the temperature is preferable. And this will lead to distributional extension, and they establish a fishery in a larger geographical coastal areas. And this distributional shift drastically changes the species mix. That means that habitat will be with a series of distributional things will happen. And finally, there is a species mix will take place. And this changed ecosystem structure, and finally, the functions and structure of the ecosystem will get changed. That means there will be a competition for feed, there will be a competition for space, and this distributional shift creates a lot of problem among the fishes. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, there are horizontal migration and vertical migration. One best example I can give you here is the oil sardine fishery. how it has distributed over all along the Indian coast, which was not there earlier. When you take this oil sardine fishery, it's a major source of protein and it's a staple food for million of coastal people that we all know. And it's having a high population doubling time in 15 to 24 months. That means it's having a high resilience and the population will become double within a short period of time. The oil sardine landings were very high during the 2014 and it was about 0.8 million ton and it was valued at US dollar of 150 million. This I'll explain later why I have taken 2014 and after 2014 how the catch has been reduced. This I'll explain in the next slide. But here what I'm going to stress upon is when you take 1960s, this oil sardine resource was restricted to a particular area. It was available between 8 to 14 degree north and 75 to 77 degree east latitude. It is called as Malabar upwelling zone along the southwest coast of India. In the first picture, you can see this Malabar upwelling zone, we can call it as Kerala coast and Karnataka coast. And here, the part of Karnataka coast, the southern part of Karnataka coast, until 1985, very less oil sardine catch was recorded beyond 14 to 22 degree north. Here, when you take between 1961 to 76, it was available in plenty in Malabar coast. And the color intensity you can see here, the yellow represents 0.1 to 1% of the population. Green represents 1 to 10% of the population. And this color, orange color, represents 10 to 25%. Pink represents 25 to 50. And this red color represents more than 50%. So according to this, the availability was more here and it is 1 to 10% here. And when you go towards Maharashtra, Goa, the availability was very less. When you take the picture afterwards, 1977 to 86, the oil sardine has moved away from Malabar coast, and when you go to Maharashtra and southern part of Maharashtra, the population density is increased and it has moved towards Tamil Nadu. And after 1987 to 1986, if you take, it has moved even along Andhra coast and the density of oil sardine here is getting increased. And later part, it has moved almost all along the peninsular coast. That means because of the increase in sea surface temperature, the fishes are moving towards the pole. Wherever there is the less temperature, the fish is getting migrated. So for when you take the last 3 decades, the availability of oil sardine between 14 to 22 degree north, it is about 15,000 tons. It is 19% of all India catch. That means when you take here, it is increased by, it was not there earlier and it is increased by 19%. And in the East Coast, it was very less than 100 tons during 1985. And when you take the same thing during 2013, it is increased to 180,000 tons. So this is the study which was conducted by CMFRI to study the migration pattern of oil sardine. And afterwards, if you take 2010 to 18, it was present even in the Gujarat coast and here in West Bengal, everywhere. The migration is still goes on. And not only this sea surface temperature, the availability or abundance of this oil sardine depends on the El Nino. The El Nino Southern Oscillation, which takes place in the Pacific Ocean. We know most of the small pelagic fishes, including peregrine anchovy, the oscillation of this El Nino Southern Oscillation, which takes place in the Pacific Ocean, which is responsible for the changes in this abundance. So here I'm not going to mention much upon this thing. The oil sardine also, whenever you take the severe El Nino period, the abundance of oil sardine has come down. There are several incidences, and since it has very high resilience and multiplying factor, and it will recover in 4 to 5 years. And similar thing is happening between 17, 18, 19. And after reaching peak in 14, it has reduced. And again, it is showing the recovery. Not only the rising sea surface temperature, and the other impacting factors are, as I mentioned, El Nino, southern oscillations, which is cascading effect on the other factors such as upwelling, primary productivity, and on the biological functioning of the fishes, that is growth rate, food availability, spawning failure, etc. These are most obvious factors. In addition, we all know there is local preference for the fish in fish condition. The fishing patterns and the marketing facilities existing in the region also plays very major role. That means for the fish meal industry also, and even for the production of fish oil, the demand for the oil sardine is very high. Overfishing is one other factor which is responsible for the variation or fluctuation in the abundance of this oil sardine fishery. We have seen horizontal migration, and the other example, that is the vertical migration. The example is mackerel, which has performed both horizontal as well as vertical migration. It generally occupies surface and subsurface waters. However, in recent years, it is increasingly caught at about 50-meter depth. We all know the fish which occupies the surface water will be exploited by the gears such as seines. There are 2-3 seines. One is purse seine, ring seine, and other boat seines, beach seines. So many seines are there. Usually, earlier period, this fish was exploited by seines. Whereas when you take after 1985 to 1989, 2% of the mackerel was exploited by bottom trawlers. This shows the fish has started during this period, the fish has started moving from surface water to deeper waters. And when you take 2010 to 14, about 18.5% of the fishes were harvested by bottom trawlers. And during 15 to 22, it is 30 to 40% of the fishes were harvested by bottom trawlers. This shows the fish is migrating or moving towards the deeper areas. And sometimes this is an example of mackerel. Similarly, the migration takes place in other fishes also. These changes in distribution leads to the change in species composition and ecological restructuring of the species. And one other thing we noticed in mackerel is changing in feeding behavior. We all know mackerel is a zooplankton feeder, which feeds on copepods. Calanus copepods are the favorable food items for this mackerel. Whereas recent years, when you see this mackerel started feeding on small pelagic fishes. That means when there is a non-availability of particular feed, the fish will switch over to its to the other prey. So this is called as tropical cascading. In the absence of one particular food, in the absence of copepods in case of mackerel, it switched over to the next tropic level, that is small pelagic fishes. This is called tropical cascading, which has happened in the fishery. So when there is migration or distribution of fisheries, people have to change their catching ability. They have to change their gear. They have to change their method of capturing fish. And when they find out new species in that area, they have to spend a lot of additional income to market those fishes. So this creates additional economic cost to the fisherman. And on fish growth, as we all know, increase in temperature will increase the growth of the fish when it is at the minimum rate. And if it continues to increase until reaching the optimum level, and beyond that, it affects the growth rate. This is what is happening when we have studied the fish during 1980s or 90s. Beginning, it was impacted in positive way. The fish growth was increased, and when the temperature increased rapidly, the growth has come down, which we have noticed in our studies. So, as I already told, we know a lot of biodiversity losses will appear, and similarly, the distribution of fishes will move from one area to other area, and we have noticed lots of lot of new fishes which are appeared in commercial fishery. One such example we have noticed here is Lagocephalus enormis. It's called as pufferfish. During 2010 and 11, it was appeared in huge quantity, and people were not in the position to utilize this fish, and they were not aware how this fish can be utilized, and they used to discard in large quantity when there was no demand for this fishery. And now also there is no preference for these fisheries in Karnataka, but whereas there is a preference for this fish along Tamil Nadu coast, Sri Lanka, and some of the Southeast Asian countries. Looking into this demand, now in the Bandar, if you go to the harbor, group of fisherwomen, they purchase this fish, they will process it, and then it will be sent to Sri Lanka and other Southeast Asian countries. What they will do is they have a skill. Pufferfish is having a toxin. They know how to remove this toxin. They remove the head and they remove the viscera, and whatever the meat they get after that will be sent to these countries. Sometimes it will be sent whole in the sense after removing the head and viscera. And the ovaries of this fish is having a lot of demand in some of the countries, and it will be exported. And sometimes it is dried and sent, and sometimes the small pieces of the meat will be exported. We have conducted a study. It was published in one of the journals. And the other fish we have noticed here is the appearance of red tooth triggerfish. It is called as Odonus niger. This fishery was there. It was present during 2006, 7, 8 and all, but it was in a less quantity, stay quantity. And this fish appeared in good numbers, in good quantity during 2015 to 16, and 2015-16, people were not in the position to utilize this fish when it was appeared, and they used to discard it. And later, during 2017 to 19, it has reached a peak, and one time it has become number one. That means it contributed maximum to the Karnataka catch, and it was available all along the Indian coast. That I think it is during 2019, and during which the oil sardine catch has come down, and people started utilizing this fish for fish meal for the production of fish meal from the fish meal plants as an alternative to oil sardine and other small pelagic fishes. And later, some surimi plants have taken this along with the pink perch, lizardfish, and ribbonfish. They started utilizing this fish for the production of surimi. And during this time, a lot of queries have come from European countries. They are the one who imported this surimi. And from the processing plant, which are there in India, there was a lot of queries. What is the protein content of this fish? What is the biochemical composition? And what is the fatty acid profile? Actually, that time, there was no study conducted all over the world about this species. We have taken up a study, and its biology was studied for the first time. Reproductive biology, diet of this triggerfish was studied for the first time. One of the MSc student from College of Fisheries has studied, one of our students, and he has published around 3 to 4 international papers. And from this, he has found out the biochemical composition, protein quality, and also the fatty acid profile of this fish, and which was published in Q1 and Q2 journals. When you take the reproductive changes, the phenology of species got affected by the change in climate. That is the sequence and timing of events. It may be growth, maturation, reproduction, and finally it changed their life cycle. To explain this phenology of the fish, when you take a fish, because of this climate change, instead of like maturing at a particular size, the fishes started maturing at the smaller size. And because of the smaller size, they used to produce less number of eggs and less number of larvae. And this leads to less recruitment to the fishery. And not only this, the timing of maturation also got affected. There was a shift in the timing of maturation, and reproduction also was mismatched. Instead of taking place in the warmer months, it was taken place in the cooler months. To give an example, the peak spawning season of some of the commercially important fishes is found to shift from warmer months of April and May. We all know April and May is the season. The fish will mature and it will spawn. And after June, the monsoon rain will come because of the copious amount of nutrient-rich water. A lot of plankton will be available in the sea due to upwelling, churning of seawater. A lot of fish food organisms are available. Whereas because of the rise in sea surface temperature, this spawning season itself has shifted to cooler months, that is to January and February, during which there is no nutrient-rich water, there is no plankton, there is no fish food organisms which is available for the larvae, and finally it resulted in recruitment loss. So we all know the period of copepod abundance is found to be during warmer months and it is shifted towards the colder months. These also have the detrimental effects on the survival of many juvenile fishes. And the olive ridley, it nests in Orissa coast. These incidents, most of us know. This happens during December to March every year. About 3 to 6 lakh turtles will come and nest in Orissa coast. The sex of this hatchling will be determined based on the soil temperature at the time of incubation. So according to the studies, it was known that those hatchlings which hatch out at the temperature of less than 27 degrees centigrade will be males, and the females will normally hatch out when the temperature is more than 27 degrees centigrade. Because of the rising temperature, the surface temperature and the atmospheric temperature, in future, if there is absence of 27 degrees centigrade, that means if it is more than that, the males will not hatch out and only the female population can be noticed. And one day this will become an extinct population. So till now we have seen how this will affect the wild fishes. And now let us see how this climate change impacts aquaculture. We know most of the aquaculture industry is depending on the artificial feed. This artificial feed is produced by using fish meal, and this fish meal is produced from trash fish. So again, because of the climate change, if it affects the wild fish or the trash fish production, the aquaculture industry will get affected. And lower catches of fish meal, the fish which is required for the production of fish meal and fish oil definitely impact the aquaculture industry. And in case of crustacean culture, like some of the shellfish like crabs, prawns, lobsters, bivalves, as I told earlier, if the water become acidic and the availability of calcium carbonate will come down, and finally, which affect the growth of the shellfish. And increased flood risks to fish and shrimp ponds. We know increased flood in the sense sea level rise will flood into the ponds which are available along coastal areas, and due to this the aquaculture will get affected. And as I explained earlier, more disease problems will come due to climatic stress to the fish, shellfish. And recently, we have noticed a lot of algal blooms in the estuarine waters and coastal waters. This is because there is eutrophication in the water. Because of the shift in monsoon, when the temperature is warmer, the copious amount of nutrient which uh, was brought from the upper streams due to the use of pesticides and fertilizers in the agriculture industries, the nutrient content in the coastal water will get increases, and which supports only few organisms in that area, and due to which algal bloom occurs. And this algal bloom is responsible for the mass death of the fishes. Maybe if you recall, during 2018-19, there was a bioluminescence in the sea, in the areas of Surathkal and Mukha. People used to travel from other areas to see this.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. Anything to ask?
Dr. Rajesh, please you continue. I think somebody without their they turned their mic on.
Yeah.
It's you continue, please.
If you recall these incidents in Mukha and Surathkal, we have noticed a lot of bioluminescence in the area. That was due to Noctiluca scintillans. This is the organisms which survived in the nutrient-rich eutrophicated water, and the D-luciferin content which was there in the Noctiluca scintillans, this reacted with the oxygen and it has become oxyluciferin. This is the one which was emitting the light. And this was triggered by the presence of luciferase enzyme. And these type of things are not at all congenial for the fishes. And when you look into the reports and studies, there was threefold increase in harmful algal blooms in the Arabian Sea during the last 2 decades. And there were only 31 events in the previous 2 decades, that is during 2000 to 2000. Previous means 2000 to 2020. There are 31 events compared to the earlier decade, that is between 1980 to 2000. It was only 10 events. That means these harmful algal events are increasing year by year. Similarly, in case of the Bay of Bengal, it has seen that a twofold increase in harmful algal bloom events, and it was 14 events in the last 2 decades compared to only 6 events in the first 2 decades, that is between 1980 and 2000. These increased incidences of anoxic conditions in the estuarine and coastal waters leads to fish migration. If it is a pelagic fish, it will migrate, but if it is a cultured fish, if the fish is cultured in estuarine water, it can't escape. Finally, the fish kills will happen and the farmer will lose the entire fish which he stocks in the cages. And there are a lot of increased incidences of paralytic shellfish poisoning, neurotic shellfish poisoning, diarrhea, etc. Let us see how this climate change will impact on the economics. The global fisheries losses are estimated at US dollar 17 to 41 billion by 2050, with East Asia, including India and the Pacific, are the most affected areas. We know about 3 billion people are rely on fish for approximately 20% of their animal protein, and 400 million people depend critically on fish for food, and we know the demand is likely to be increased. Climate change threatens current and future production levels, food security, and fisheries industry, and also the employment. The substantial reduction in fishing days due to extreme weather we have noticed during the last 2 decades. The normal fishing days are between 280 to 300 days after removing the monsoon season. Whereas because of the extreme climatic events which we noticed during the last 2 decades, the number of fishing days are being reduced and it is only 200 to 250 days. And sometimes we experienced there is a shift of fish stocks from one national boundary to the other national boundaries. And this shifting of fish stocks in international waters may present issues for governments attempting to reach fishing agreements. We've already seen we have Indian Ocean's Tuna Commission. The tuna fish is a highly migratory fish. It crosses transboundary, and for sharing of this resource, till now people have not come to the conclusion how much to be shared by the neighboring countries, the countries which are sharing this Indian Ocean. So these type of problems will arise in future, and sometimes it leads to enhanced illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. We know fishermen spends a lot of time, a lot of money for the diesel and other purposes. When you go, when there is no fishing and he wants to catch something and come back, then definitely he has to go for illegal fishing. And because of this, the IUU fishing will be increased. And as the fisheries production declines, the commodities will increase in price. We know the price, once the fish production comes down, the price of a particular commodity will get increased. Now let us see what are the initiatives as an institute or Central Marine Fisheries Research Institute has taken to combat this climate change. We have conducted a study in a funded project. It's a flagship project of CMFRI, and it is from Indian Council of Agricultural Research. The project is National Innovations in Climate Resilient Aquaculture. Under this project, we have studied vulnerability of 68 species of finfish and shellfish for the climate change from the 4 different zones, that is from Southwest Zone and Northwest Zone, Southeast Zone and Northeast Zone. From the study, it was found that about 69% of the species studied are highly vulnerable along the Indian coast, and the susceptibility is being higher along East Coast. And the fishing pressure contributes significantly to stock fluctuations and reproductive output. Not only the climate change, the fishing pressure also contributes to fluctuations in fish stock and also the reproductive output. And species with restricted geographic distributions are especially vulnerable to climate change. This we all know. The one which can migrate to other area is not much vulnerable, whereas the species which is restricted to a particular geographic area has highly vulnerable to this climate change. And we have come out with a lot of management plans and advisories, and it was given to Government of Karnataka for the implementation. And one such thing is the GIS-based resource mapping. This is the first study of its kind along Indian marine fisheries. Through participatory GIS, the map was prepared. Here, a lot of log sheets were prepared. Based on that, the information on fisheries, juveniles, and all whatever information we needed was collected from the fishermen, and mapping was done. And some marine protected areas also was given as an advisory for the conservation of juveniles and ATP species, that is endangered, threatened, and protected species. And we have studied a few species, which includes Nemepterus japanicus, Lacteris lacteris, and Nemepterus rendali. So here in this map, we have given the availability of the fish during different season and different regions. And this red mark shows the availability of juveniles. So if you avoid these areas, and we can avoid catching of juveniles. And similarly for the Lactarius also, we have studied and given some advisories, and even for the Randalli also we have given a lot of advisories. And from our study, we found out that the area between Bhatkal and Kasaragod in Uttara Kannada was found to uh, found that it's a very highly stressed habitat, and this is having poor taxonomic diversity compared to previous times. It is having a small rocky zone, and in this area, the Netrani Island is there, and it's having a lot of coral reef ecosystem. And as a conservative measures, we advised to take up this as a marine protected area to rebuild the stressed habitat. And the major thing which we took along the Karnataka coast and all along the Indian coast from the Central Marine Fisheries Research Institute was installation of cages, installation of cages all along the Indian coast. And according to the study conducted by the Energy and Resource Institute during 1996, they found out that along Karnataka coast, Dakshina Kannada and Udupi are the districts which are most vulnerable to sea level rise. And it was estimated to have very severe economic impacts in these areas. So in fisheries point of view, the invasion of salt water in estuarine waters areas due to sea level rise, and there is a marked reduction in fishery of estuarine species, and about which so many people like small scale fishermen who are dependent on fishery of this estuarine area. And because of the salinization, the diversity of this estuarine environment has come down. And finally, it has affected on the livelihood of the fishermen, that is the traditional fishermen. And there was an immediate need for empowering these people with the technologies to make their livelihood in the changed scenario. What we have taken up is, we have taken up a cage culture, a small scale cage culture along this area. In the beginning, we did capture-based aquaculture. From the capture fisheries, whatever the small fishes they caught was used to stock in these small cages. And once they grew to marketable size, it was harvested. Beginning only, this was taken up, and later the hatchery produced seeds such as sea bass, cobia, bigot traveling, pearl spot, and groupers were used. And in a small scale, it was taken up along Ukunda coast. It is in Udupi district, and now it has grown as a big industry. And here you can see the series of demonstration which we have taken up in different cage designs situated from different estuarine areas, created interest in cage farming in Karnataka. And in this graph, you can notice in 2009-10, the demonstration was started with 5 cages. These produced about 3.2 tons of fish, and it was gradually increased to 120 cages during 2016-17, and it produced about 96 tons of fish. Whereas this is the time, lot of agencies like National Fisheries Development Board and State Department, they supported this type of activity, and there was a rapid growth after 2016-17, and at present about 800 fish cages are present in Karnataka, producing about 1,000 tons of fish, a worth of 32 crores, and which has given a livelihood of a lot of fishermen who are staying along the coastal waters. These are some of the reports from our cage culture. And now, for the last 2 to 3 years, we have introduced one more species called pompano in the estuarine areas. There are 2 types of pompano, which is cultured in Indian waters. One is silver pompano, and the other one is Indian pompano. The seed production of both these species in Visakhapatnam and Vizhinjam of CMFRA. Our own institute is producing the seed. And the culture period, when you take for sea bass and the red snapper, it is almost a year. Here, the culture period of this fish is 6 months. And for other fishes, they were using trash fish as a feed, whereas here we can use pelleted feed. So the water quality issues can be taken care of. And this fish is having high market demand, and it is compatible with integrated fish aquaculture. It is compatible with mussels, oysters, and seaweed for the integration. This is one of the demonstration which we have taken 2 years back in Halayangadi. And IMTA, it is called as Integrated Multi-Trophic Aquaculture. The concept here is when we take up cage culture alone, about 60 to 70% of the feed only will be utilized by the fish. The other feed, that means 30 to 40% of the feed, which go as waste and which accumulates in the estuarine water, and it creates eutrophic conditions, and sometimes the hypoxic condition also will be created. What we have done here is the integration of this cage cultured fish with the bivalves and seaweeds. So the 30 to 40% of the feed which goes as waste is in two forms. One is the particulated organic matter, and once it is dissolved in the water, and it is also having dissolved inorganic nutrients in it. So to utilize it, the bivalves, as we all know, mussels and oysters, they are all filter feeders. They filter this waste and it will grow. And similarly, the dissolved inorganic nutrients will be utilized by the seaweeds. And this is the concept we have taken up in Padutonse. It's a place in Udupi district. And in one demonstration from 6 into 2 into 2 meter cage, we have produced around 1,500 kg of fish along with 700 to 800 kgs of mussels. And this demonstration we have taken up in 4 to 5 places along Karnataka with the funding support of National Fisheries Development Board this year. And the project will be there for 2 years. So to conclude, fisheries and aquaculture are directly impacted by climate change. As the changes occur in physical, chemical, and biological alterations in the marine environment, these sectors, that means fisheries and aquaculture, are also becoming more vulnerable to non-climate stressors such as pollution, overfishing, and habitat loss. Segregating human-induced and climate-induced damages to the marine environment is extremely difficult. So we have developed a climate-smart marine fisheries to safeguard the future of Indian fisheries. And the reducing and regulating, to reduce and regulate the fishing effort, we have to find out the optimum fleet size time to time, and we have to go for closed areas and closed season. It is based on, again, I told, juvenile fishery. We have to map areas where there is abundance of juvenile, and these areas should be closed the season during which the juvenile abundance is there, and those areas should be closed. And ecosystem-based fisheries management, this is one such management strategy wherein we have to involve all the stakeholders, starting from fishers, marketing people, industrialists, research, and whoever is directly or indirectly involved in fisheries has to be involved, involved, and we have to create awareness among themselves how the climate change is affecting our fisheries, and along with that, what are the other stresses which we as anthropogenic activities we are doing, and how it can be taken care of. And the other things are restriction of destructive fishing methods. Some of the fishing methods which are still existing along Karnataka, even though after banning, are light fishing and bull trawling. So these things should be regulated. And the alternative livelihood activities of fishing, as I told, we have attempted to give some of the alternative livelihood activities, such as cages in estuaries and coastal waters. But nowadays, as I told earlier, we have already reached 800 to 1,000 kgs along estuarine waters, and we have to explore the offshore seas to go for offshore areas, to go for mariculture activities in a bigger scale. The other things are we have to encourage the cultivation of fish species that can thrive in changing environmental conditions, and the integration of wind and solar energy in fishing vessels. This is one area most of the developed countries have already taken an action, and we also should look into these things and see ranching of depleted commercial species, the endangered and threatened protected species. We have to produce and has to be ranched in the sea, and restriction on fishing of species disappearing from fishery. For example, oil sardine, as I told, so every 10 or 20 years, there will be a depletion of fishery. When the fishery is depleted, we should have a restriction on this type of fishery, and we should go for other exploitation for the fisheries. And adoption of minimum legal size in fisheries. We've already like developed a minimum legal size for 78 species along Karnataka coast. And out of that, 19 has already been implemented by Karnataka government. We have to reduce the dependence on fish meal. We know there are a lot of alternatives, but still most of the aquaculture industries are depending on this. One such promising thing is black soldier fly, but unfortunately it has not been used extensively in aquaculture industry. So the dependence of this fish meal has to be somehow reduced. We have to reassess and reinforce the marine protected areas and formation of artificial reefs. This is one area which is being worked all along the Indian coast nowadays. The best example is in Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu, they have put a lot of artificial reefs, and these artificial reefs has created a new ecosystem wherein a lot of organisms are using this as a breeding and feeding grounds, and which is supporting fishery of the traditional fishermen, and traditional fishermen are mostly depending on these artificial reefs. And these artificial reefs uh, is being taken place in other states, and in Karnataka about 56 places have already been selected, and in future days these artificial reefs will be installed, and this creates a new ecosystem for the protection of some of the ATP species. And the last one is cultivation of sea plants as carbon sequestration agents. We know seaweed farming is one such activities that has to be taken place. But unfortunately, along our coast, we do not have favorable environment for taking up this seaweed farming, because we know that it needs a lot of calm water, uh, clear water, and it needs a lot of sheltering areas. Whereas the waters which we have are more turbid, and the current is very high compared to the east coast. And east coast in Mandapam and Trivandrum and some other places, this seaweed farming is taken up in large scale. But we have to find out some solution to take up this seaweed farming all along the Indian coast. And at last, responsible fisheries along with carbon-free lifestyle is the need of the hour to save the marine environment and marine fisheries. Thank you. I thank Dr. Anirban and his team for providing the opportunity to share my views on climate change and its impact on marine fisheries. And I would be happy if there are any clarifications, discussions needed about this. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Rajesh. It was wonderful insight into how climate change impact marine fisheries. You not only covered the marine part, you also gave examples of the aquaculture effects on aquaculture, and also the later part of your presentation included the efforts put up by CMFRI in addressing some of these questions. As you rightly said, it is perhaps very difficult to distinguish between the impacts that are being brought about by uh, anthropogenic factors and climate induced factors, but it is nevertheless, considering such a diverse environment, um, it is really nice to know the efforts that are being put up by your organization, and also for the various areas that need to be looked into. Um, Thank you once again. It was indeed quite informative and quite resourceful in terms of information that you shared with us. There are a few questions that are put up in the chat box. I will probably read it for you, or maybe you can only read it. There is a question from Dr. Pravin. He asks you, hello, sir. Will rise in average ocean temperature affect the pelagic fishes more, or would it be the same across all strata?
Sorry, I did get it. The rising,
Will the rise in average ocean temperature
yeah.
affect the pelagic fishes more, or do you think it could be across all strata?
No, effect will be there on all the fishes. Only thing is the pelagic fishes have the migratory capacity and they can escape from that environment and move off. Whereas the other organisms which are present on the bottom of the sea, they have the less locomotory capacity and they will not escape and they will get affected more. That was the thing he has asked?
Yeah, that is one. Yeah,
Oh.
right. So you think that the effect is across all strata of habitats that you have?
Yeah, all start of habitat, but the intensity differs from
Because,
species to species.
okay.
Yeah.
And there is one more question from Dr. Dikshit. He asks you uh, about the contradiction that we have about the impact of climate change on Arctic zone. There are people who are saying that it has led to a lot of melting of ice, but there are also reports saying that actually there is more of accumulation of ice. So, what is your take on this? Is the impact of climate change more prominent in the tropical areas, or is it across the globe, including the Arctic region?
No, including the Arctic, there is an effect. I have shown in one of the picture, no
Yeah.
country is spared, including Arctic. The effect is there even in Arctic zone. And I've shown some of the examples. There are more of glaciers when you take the previous years, and the glacier cover has come down. And when you take the average temperature, even in the temperate as well as tropics, there is a lot of changes. So the effect is there all along, not only in tropical countries.
Okay. There is one more question from Prithvi Sagar. So his question is: does variation in migratory pattern of sardine,
Hmm.
the data that he showed,
Hmm.
is primarily due to change in the water surface temperature, or could it be due to the changes in the feed availability?
No, oil sardine, as I've already told, we can't say it is due to one parameter. It depends on so many parameters. According to our recent study, it is directly linked with the El Nino, which is happening in Pacific Ocean. Due to El Nino, the monsoon winds which forms along our coast, Indian coast, will get affected. We will have more drier season when compared to other period. So not only that, during El Nino period, because of the environmental changes and due to climate change, there will be a change in the reproductive strategy. We have studied during our college days, there is a resorption and reproductive failure. And these are the things, it's a combined factor. We can't point out, oh, it is only due to this, it is happening. It's a
Right.
combination of the factors which is affecting the oil sardine fishing.
Climate change could be one of the many
Yeah,
factors.
one
Yes.
of the major factors I can say, but along with that, there are so many other factors which is
Right.
influencing the abundance of oil sardine.
Right. There are two more questions for you, and then maybe I'll open it for. I think Dr. Yasin has raised his hand. Okay, we will come to you, Dr. Yasin, in a bit. Dr. Biswajit is asking you a question. Are there any specific studies conducted in India looking at the impact of climate change on biodiversity or fish redistribution?
Biodiversity, there are a lot of things are there, but in this I have not mentioned anything. There are so many studies which have conducted and shown that there is biodiversity.
Primarily, I mean, looking at the impact of climate change that is leading to a depletion or perhaps replenishment of a particular species, or
Yeah, extinction of
perhaps
so
over representation of a particular species.
yeah. When you take aquatic environment as a whole, We can't say only for fish. There are so many organisms starting from plankton to fish. So a lot of studies are there, and the extinction of a species also has been reported from studies. There is a biological loss due to climate change.
Okay. So all these are, I mean, people have attributed all of these to a change in the existing climatic conditions, right?
Yes, the change in the climatic conditions.
Okay. And there is one more from Dr. Akila. She is asking, yeah, this is a very interesting question, I would say. Is it the temperature of the ocean surface that, or the increase in the ocean surface temperature, or is it the decrease in salinity due to the rise in the sea level that is contributing to the changes that you are seeing in the marine fauna?
Increase in salinity, increase in temperature is the major thing. See, when the
But
temperature
as you mentioned,
increases, thermal expansion of water takes place. Because of
yeah,
the thermal expansion of the water, that is the one which is the major causative factor for the sea level rise.
right.
So, if that is the major causative factor, salinity won't come down.
But
It
if
is
you are saying
expansion of the
if there are
water.
no melting of the
Only
Arctic,
when there is a melting of ice, the melting of the ice, which is responsible for the reduction of salinity.
hmm.
Okay,
But then,
when
as you mentioned, there are two factors. One is increased melting of ice in the Arctic region, which is contributing to rise in the water level, which is coming down to the oceans. Is it
yeah,
not also contributing to a change in the salinity, which is probably making it more difficult for fish to survive in that condition?
okay, you take it in
Particularly
this way.
estuarine, particularly the estuarine fauna, if you could ask.
See, when when you take the atmosphere increase in atmospheric temperature, the loss of water from the sea as a due to evaporation will be more.
You're
So
right.
I don't think the salinity of the sea or the salinity has come down in the ocean.
Okay.
Instead, the salinity of the estuarine waters and coastal waters has been increased. It is not the reduction in the salinity; it is the increase in the salinity which we can notice. That
Increase in
increase in salinity.
all right. So
Affecting the
these are
sea
the
surface
questions that are there.
temperature, the temperature of atmosphere also is getting increased, and that is responsible for the evaporation loss.
Okay. So these are the questions that we have on the chat box. I think Dr. Yassin wants to ask you something. Over to you, Dr. Yassin.
Thank you, sir. Rajesh sir, glad to talk to you again. It is long back, CMFR Chennai. I think you might be remembering me. Uh, Actually, I do have a lot of questions, not only one or two, but I don't know how many questions I can ask here.
Dr. Yassin, due to paucity of time, we'll take a couple of questions if it is okay with
Yes,
you.
sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I will restrict with my two, three questions only, not more
Right.
than that. So, sir, you said like there is a decline in pH in this Arabian Sea around the Indian Ocean
Yeah.
area, and normally my perception is whatever it is saline, it is alkaline for me. And if it is less pH, to what extent will be the pH?
In Arabian Sea, as I already mentioned, it is the average pH in the Arabian Sea is 7.9. And when you take the northern part of Indian Ocean, it is still less. It is between 7 to 7.9. So earlier it was more than that, and it is reduced due to the acidification of water.
So it is not actually acidic, but it is acidifying when compared to other region. Okay.
Yeah,
So
yeah. No, no, no. Don't take that literal meaning of
sir, I have gone into that.
acidification.
How come it is acidic?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So,
Normally
that
we say 7 is the neutral, and anything less than 7 will be
is
acidic.
acidic.
No,
Yeah.
no,
I
don't take into that
Yes,
aspect.
sir. Yes, sir.
It is
So,
getting towards the
yes, sir.
acidic. Yeah.
Yes, sir. So that means my next question is not valid. Means I thought like if it is acidic, how the coral reefs are surviving? That was my question. And next one is how the mollusks are having their shells in acidic condition. So that is not needed now. One more question is related to the climate change. What do you think about the reason will be for heavy downpour in southern districts of Tamil Nadu recently? So recently, 2 3 days back, and even yesterday, we have seen lot of rainfall in South Tamil Nadu. What is the reason for that?
No, that's what I'm telling. These climate extremities, no, because of the low pressure, low temperature in a particular area, maybe the meteorologist will be able to tell
Yeah.
this question.
And that too, like in places where we can see like annual rainfall in single day. So that much it was heavy. So I was so surprised. And I do have one more personal
Yeah, that's
question.
what cloud bursting is one of the things which we have noticed in Uttaranchal and other places. And these are all called as climate extremities, which is taking place all along the Indian coast.
Recently, nowadays it is happening so frequently. Like every
Yeah.
year we could see these kind of incidents. And
That's
only
what I
one.
told you in my introductory talk.
Sorry, sir, I
Still,
missed your introduction part. I joined around 3:15 only.
yeah, the
Uh,
thing is, as a scientist, maybe in 80s or 90s, if you take, we were not believing climate change is a reality. Most of us were thinking it's a myth. But now, after witnessing so many incidences for the last 1 or 2 decades, now even a common man says climate change is a reality.
So the 80s and 90s, I was in school. I don't know much about that. So I can talk only what I do have in my mind. So one personal question, it is not related to your presentation. Like even my uncle used to say, like pig meat is used in preparing fish meal. So don't eat cultured fish. That kind of opinion is there in my family. So whether it is true or it is just a myth.
You don't eat fish?
Sir, actually, we are traditional Muslims and we don't eat cultured fish. We buy only sea fish kind of thing.
Wild fish.
Uh,
Because they are using fish meal in cultured fish, don't eat those fishes. That was
yeah.
the thing your father used to take?
No,
Used to,
my uncle used to say, my
uncle.
uncle, sir, my
No, no.
uncle was from CMFRA. He was HOD in CMFRA. He retired in 2010,
I
and
don't know
even
in what context he told you. Because when you're eating a fish, that feed is made out of that fish and they are producing the fish out of it. Maybe to reduce the use of, if you don't eat the cultured fish, maybe the demand for the cultured fish will come down and the usage of fish meal may come. I don't know what was his context. I think there is no harm in eating cultured fish.
No, I
okay,
think Dr.
okay.
Yassin has a different concern. She was little concerned about one of the
Yeah,
ingredients that she thinks is being used in the fish meal, perhaps.
Sir, whether they are using it or not.
they're using it. Fish meal they're using.
No, no. I mean, she was
Oh,
asking about ingredient which is not supposed to be used. Am I right, Dr. Yassin?
yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir.
Now we'll
Ingredient.
take it up later. Maybe we can take it up later because climate change or not, I think we can't give up on fish. So obviously, maybe Dr. Rajesh, we can take it up personally. Perhaps you can look into whether that is indeed true. But Dr. Yasin, for all you know, I think towards the end of his presentation, he said that they have introduced cages all around, and these are basically cultured fishes. So what you buy in the market perhaps could come from any of these cages that they are growing, including the different kinds of fishes that you have. So maybe we need to find out with Dr. Rajesh from where these fishes are procured, whether it is from one of his cages in Kundapur or some other region, and then decide whether to eat or not.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right. On a lighter note, any other questions? Anyone has anything to ask? You can
Sir,
please.
this is very, very nice, interesting presentation. More than the content of the presentation, how Rajesh sir has expressed in his face, that was more interesting. Like we were having pleasure to watch this presentation. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So if we do not have any more questions, we would like to conclude today's program. Thank you once again, Dr. Rajesh, for spending your valuable time with us and sharing your knowledge and experience in this field. We are indeed quite happy and thankful to you and your organization for taking these issues up, and also for all the efforts that you're putting in ensuring that we get fish to eat, and there is no dearth in the supply that comes in the market. On behalf of Nucser, on behalf of Nitte University, I would like to extend heartfelt thanks to you for the wonderful lecture that you have given today, and we look forward to having you again in some capacity, either in the institution, and if there are opportunities to take up research together with your organization, it would be a great opportunity for us also to contribute towards these efforts that you are putting in this field. I thank all the participants who have joined in. I think we had a good number of participants who were listening to you, and I'm sure many of them perhaps were not directly linked to fisheries, but it is out of curiosity and out of their interest that they have joined the session. I thank all of them, and I look forward to having all of you again. We have a series of webinars coming up. We will share with you the details as and when they come up. And I can see Dr. Mridula from Fisheries College is also here. Dr. Mridula, thank you very much for joining in. And all the other people who have come from other institutions, and all my people here in Nucser. Thank you very much, Dr. Rajesh. We will conclude here.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Anirban, for providing
We'll
the
end the meeting.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, everyone. Thank you very much.